Hi guys, I just wanted to first say thank you for coming to my session. It really means a lot to me. It's really special. I hope you enjoy it. And I'd like to also thank ROI for having me as a whole, and as well as the Mensch Network. Gina Flash from South Africa, which is where I'm from, nominated me for this incredible experience, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to be here. So what is a BiteSize Revolution? No one knows what it means, but it's provocative. So my name is Kayli Levitan. I am from Cape Town, South Africa, and I work in advertising at a really lovely company called M&C Saatchi Abel. As advertisers, we're problem solvers. So whether we're trying to sell more beer for one of our clients or get people to use the online shop versus to go to a normal store, we're trying to solve problems in creative ways using communication effectively. And what I try and do as a copywriter in this agency is use those same techniques that we use, effective communication, to try and actually create change in the world, to try and make situations a little bit better. As someone who works in advertising, we try and problem solve, but it's problem solving with a difference. But first, before we even get to that, let's discuss amongst ourselves some problems that we'd like to solve in the world. I'm going to go first, my pen, and I'm going to write homelessness on the list. So I don't know if you guys want to chat amongst yourselves, or if you just want to kind of say it out loud, and we'll just add a list of some problems to this flip chart that we'll then discuss later on in the session.
Malnutrition.
Violence? Was it violence? Violence?
Inequality or poverty?
Cool.
Prostitution.
Excuse me?
Prostitution.
Mental illness.
Whoops. Sorry if some of these are South African spellings. No, I think we're okay.
Addiction.
Addiction.
Global warming.
Cool. Global warming.
The gender pay gap.
Gender pay gap. Should have written smaller.
Displacement.
Displacement. That's not going to fit there. Let's put that one here. Displacement. Any other one? Let's try and fill one more space.
I fought with my parents. Just kidding.
I fought with my parents. You can deal with that one on your own.
Healthcare, access to healthcare.
Access. Cool, that fits. Access to health. Okay. Cool. So these are all very relevant global issues. This is not specific to one country or one city, one continent even. I mean, South Africa has all of these issues, and as do all of your countries. The crux of it is that people are all good, not just us. We have a lot of change makers, as much as I hate that word. There's a lot of change makers here at this conference. People want to make a difference. They really do, but they don't know how. They don't know how, they don't know where, they're overwhelmed by the problem. Because often we're told that we're our title, and Jane, the accountant, doesn't feel like she has a space trying to help poverty. Or Brian, the cyclist, professional cyclist, doesn't think that he has a space where he can work to try and improve global warming. There are all these huge global problems that people don't know how to tackle, whether it's because they're overwhelmed by them, whether it's because they don't know how, they don't know where, or they don't know what it is that they can do. But the biggest problem is the fact that each of these is impossible to solve. They're too big. That's the be-all and end-all. You cannot fix these problems because they're so entrenched globally. It's a global issue that no matter what you do, you cannot click your fingers and create that sort of change. So maybe we need to relook the way that we actually create change. So what I'm going to do is, something's going to appear over here. The word change, what is it? So the dictionary says that change is the act or the process through which something becomes different. I mean, we all know that. Let's look at 3 examples of change. Let's do a simple one, an egg. If you put an egg into a pot of water and heat it up, what happens to the egg? It gets hard. But not eggs of the future are going to come out that way just because you boiled one egg and made it a hard-boiled egg. It's a very passive transformation that you've created on a passive inanimate object. Meaningless, really, really meaningless. So that's change number 1. That's our functional change. Very functional change in the egg situation. Another type of change. Now, help me out here. How much does toothpaste cost in the States? Someone?
$3.
$3, okay. So you're going to the shops to buy your toothpaste. Probably the toothpaste your parents bought, probably, just advertising. And you're reaching for it. I see you reaching for your toothpaste. It's $3. The other toothpaste is $1.50 today, and today only. And you're like, I'm going to take this one. And you take it, and you buy it, and you use it, and it's fine. But next month, when you go back to buy another tube of toothpaste, and they're all $3 again, you're going to go back to your original one, the one that you're used to buying. That is called consequential change. It's a consequence of, a passive situation that happens within the experience. So it's a sale, it was nice, it was a once-off, you go back to your original. So that is what we call consequential change. It's even easy to create consequential change in the NGO space. It's easy. You make someone feel bad enough, they'll donate once. You, in a situation, for example, with the flood, we just had some really bad flooding in South Africa. There was a crazy, crazy flood for 3 days, and suddenly all the homeless shelters were getting all the money and all the clothes and all the support, and it was amazing, and everyone was so proud of the South African people for working towards helping the homeless. And then the flood ended, and everyone went back to their daily lives feeling really happy that they made a difference. And they carried on living, and nothing within them was changed. It was like the sale. It was a once-off. And that's not something that's meaningful. That's not something that we can do that's actually going to affect change on a more citywide or global level. What we need to do is create a sort of change that is not just about that once-off. That's not about today, but that's about tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And that's what I call transformational change. Transformational change is when it's long-term. It's when it's meaningful. It's when you get to the human problem, the human negative perception. It's that thing that you're not affecting the person's action, the act of donating. You're affecting the way they think. So you're changing their perceptions, their stereotypes, and the way that they look at the world in order to change the way they think, not just the day that they donate, but forevermore. And that is what I call a bite-size revolution. We can't solve violence. We can't solve inequality. We can't solve these big problems. But if we look for those little nuggets, those small parts of the greater whole that we can affect, and it's always based in human insight and the human condition and in human negative perception or stereotyping, if we all do them, we start eating away at the greater problem, diminishing it to something so much smaller that ultimately can be broken down and overcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, I've even got a description of it. So BiteSize Revolution is creating meaningful transformational change by changing the way people think, their perceptions, their stereotypes, and their behaviors, not their actions. Their actions are a consequence of the change in their mental state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through 3 examples of projects that I've worked on of varying scale. One of them, I mean, I'm even embarrassed to show you, it was one of the first NGOs that I worked with, and it was way over dramatic, but the insight was there. The insight was right. All the way through to something that I'm working on a day-to-day basis, which is a little bit bigger. So how do we create these bite-sized resolutions? Where do we find these human problems? It's all within people and within their stories. So this first one, it's something we created called Remember Me Not for Dementia South Africa. So I'm glad mental illness came up. The reason why I was so passionate about this organization is because my gran suffered from dementia for 6 years before she passed away. And for 6 years, she didn't know who any of us were. She didn't know who she was. She woke up every day thinking that my grandfather had gone to work and wondering where he was and why he wasn't phoning her to tell her how his day was, but he had passed away 10 years earlier. And I saw how my mom, I wasn't living in the same city at the time, I saw how my mom went every single day to see her, even though my gran didn't know she was there. But my mom was the only one doing it. There were no other kids in the old age home with their parents. There were no other grandkids. There were no young people there. For many reasons. It could be that they feared their own mortality. It was something that you then think, oh my goodness, is this one day going to be my reality? Or the fact that it was just frightening. And what is the point of being there for someone who doesn't understand you? You can't cure dementia. You can't help people with dementia overcome it. But what you can do is make their loved ones realize that they deserve and need love. Because if they've got supports, it makes the process of having this dreadful disease a little bit easier for them to cope with. So that's what we did. We targeted the youth. We targeted people to make them realize what it would feel like if they were the ones that were left alone. This was an app that we created. Again, it's super overdramatic. If I was to redo it today, I would do it completely differently, but the idea was there. And what we did is we used the platform that younger people use every single day, which was Facebook. What you would do is you would log into this app called Remember Me Not. It would pull all your Facebook content, and it would create a video similar to this one that you're about to see. This is, of course, you'll see my stuff, but you can imagine it's in your context. Play.
It starts with the little things. Losing your train of thought mid-sentence. The title of your favorite book or movie skips your mind. You start to forget your friends. First it's a name, then a face, as if they were never there. You forget who you love and who you don't. The moments you shared begin to fade. It's lonely. There's nowhere to go. No one to talk to. They say they're your family. Your mother, your brother, your wife, your child. You forget where you come from, where you are going. Your world slowly empties. You forget your life, your history, your everything. You forget how you became you.
It broke through a negative human behavior. It didn't tell people to go and donate. It didn't tell people to go and necessarily learn more. It told them to go and love their family members. It was affecting that human condition, that human insights that we can target. You can change mental and negative perceptions or attitudes or behaviors within people, but not necessarily through telling them that they're wrong, but showing them through experience, showing them through emotion, showing them by putting them into the situation in this case, what it would feel like if they were there. So that was the first one. Again, I would have done it slightly differently now. The second one is a campaign that we created called 2 Billion Care. I'm not going to tell you what it was for because there's a twist in it. So I'm just going to play it, and then we'll get back to what it was all about.
Some people don't care about me because they don't see my beauty. Some people don't care about me because they think I have nothing to give. But 2 billion people do. To them, I am everything. Their home, their food, their livelihood. But day by day, I disappear. And so does everything I give. 2 billion people care about me, need me. And now, I need you.
So not only is there no negative perception about the drylands, people don't even know what they are. Unless you're in this sort of context, people go, oh, it's a desert. Deserts don't need our help. What's the point? There's forests that need our help, and there's the waste of paper, and there's this that needs our help, and there's that. But they don't realize that there's 2 billion human beings that are reliant on a place that's called the drylands. They don't even know that it exists. And to overcome their negative attitude towards this place, we needed to associate it to something that they would care about. So by not just going to say to them, listen, you need to look after the deserts. You need to make sure that the deserts and the drylands don't disappear. We associated it using metaphor to something that's very much a topic of conversation, and that's women, the way people speak about women, the way people look at women, and bringing them in that way, and then twisting it to tell the story about the dryland forests. This was something that is being used through the various FAO talks around in the UN in different regions, and we're now working on getting it into the public eye. So at this point, it wouldn't have actually been seen by anybody else. And then last but not least, oh, that was a metaphor to make the unknown known. And then last but not least is an organization that I co-founded called The Street Store. And The Street Store is something that has just opened every door to me, not just to experiences, but it's opened my eyes to how a little change can have such a big impact. That's why I keep speaking back to homelessness. We can't we can't solve homelessness. It's impossible. There's too many people, there's too much trouble, there's too much going on. But if you look at the smaller problem, why don't people connect with the homeless? And try and work on that. And someone else works with the homeless. That amazing speaker the other day who's working with trying to upskill the homeless. He's working with the homeless, and you could be working with the homeless and someone else. Together, we break up that bigger issue into something that one day will be manageable. The Street Store was something that is about clothes. That's what it looks like on the outside. So people think, the people that are getting involved, they're like, this is about clothes. It's about a sense of dignity for the homeless, getting clothes that they can choose. But it's actually not what we set out to do. Clothes were the mechanic for connection. Myself and my colleague Max, we were standing on our balcony in Greenpoint in Cape Town. It's a very hip and trendy area, but there's a huge homeless problem. And we were watching people. We say the haves and the have-nots. We don't say rich and poor, because I work and live in that area, and I'm not rich, but I have more than the homeless. So we're watching as the have and the have-nots cross each other's paths on the streets that they share every single day, but they never connect with each other. And the reason for this is twofold. Both are at fault. We can't help every homeless person. It's impossible. So you dehumanize them, you pretend they're not there. On the other hand, it's undignified. They feel this enormous sense of pain having to beg. So they stop seeing you as a person. They start seeing you as a pocket in order to make it easier. So you're dehumanized too. This is when you start to see situations where homeless people might shout at you, they might swear at you. I've had someone follow me down a road telling me that they deserve my help. So they're dehumanizing us as well, and that's also not okay. So what we wanted to do is, while bringing in clothing donations for the Haven Night Shelter was our how we facilitated this connection, we didn't do it like a cold clothing drive, which is the typical way of bringing in donations. We wanted to overcome both sides' negative perception of one another in order to bring them together to learn from each other. And so this is what we did.
South Africa, a country where the haves and have-nots live side by side, but seldom connect. People want to help, but aren't always sure how. And for the homeless, begging is degrading. In partnership with the Haven Night Shelter, the Street Store was born. The world's first rent-free, premises-free, free pop-up store for the homeless. Somewhere safe to give and easy to collect. Made only from posters people hang up and drop off donations. Then the homeless choose things they actually want and like. For many used to rummaging in bins, this was their first dignified shopping experience.
Shopping at the street store was for me very nice. The people was accepting me with friendly faces.
A week before the pop-up, we called for donations on social media. Within days, we found ourselves on prominent national blogs, news, radio, and TV. But the world wanted in too. Bono's One organization, Huffington Post, Good, and hundreds of others. Thousands of homeless were clothed in South Africa alone, and millions in free PR was generated. More importantly, we brought people together like never before. But homelessness is international, so we went open source. To date, 162 stores have popped up in 119 cities, and over 2,200 are in progress.
A brand new way of helping the homeless.
Proyecto que nace en Sudáfrica y en San
And it's now on Macaulay Avenue in Chattanooga.
A few simple posters to restore the dignity to the homeless in Cape Town suddenly touched the lives of so many more.
You are sent from heaven. Thank you very much. There's no way I can pay you back. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, man.
Just this video we made a little while ago, I actually just uploaded the 650th store. We've been in 200 cities, the 650th official store, because sometimes people forget to tell us that they're doing them. They've actually been about 780, but officially 650. And every day we get more people getting involved, more languages being donated into, translated into, and more people who are using it as a platform to do good, a platform to make a change, and an inspiration for them to do something else. We've had someone open a homeless shelter. After doing 3 street stores, he realized he wanted to do something else, and he opened a shelter. We had someone else start their own organization called Rainbow Saturday in reaction to Black Friday, where it was about the giving away of things. They had a store, it wasn't about clothing. We had the story in the UK where there was a news station at a store recording live, interviewing live, and someone saw their father who they'd lost many years ago, lost being the wrong word actually to use. Their father had an addiction problem many years previously and had left their family, and they saw them in the store, found him, and they found him for the first time in 12 years. And while it is about bringing people together around the idea of clothing, more importantly, it's about establishing those connections and helping people realize, on the one hand, the homeless are not the criminals we think they are. They are human beings who are deserving of love. And on their side, it's about the fact that we are people. And we too need to understand each other, and we need to work with each other to overcome those stereotypes and ultimately make this world a better place. It was dignity through connection. And I think that that is what we have to find in all of these problems. What are the little human issues that we can tackle? That we can take our skills, our resources, our knowledge, our understanding, our insights, our beliefs. What can we take that we don't know because we're in such different parts of the world that will break down each of these issues into smaller parts so that we can ultimately solve them together? Because change is actually not the actual process through which something becomes different, but the actual process through which someone becomes different. And we need to reorientate the way we try and do it and make it about the people's perceptions and not about the act. And if we can do that, I really, really do believe that in time, and it could take a very long time, all of these things can be solved. And it's about working together to figure out a way of doing that. And I think it would be really interesting if we just, how much time do we have? Spend a little bit of time just maybe brainstorming in groups or chatting together about if anyone's got any thoughts about the human problems within these various categories, like overarching categories. It's a tough one. If there's anything that from your experience, from your context, that we can look at. So homelessness, we can't solve the housing crisis, but we can look at connecting people, which allows us to slowly but surely start getting people off of the streets. Eventually, we've had people, here's an example. Someone who would never have hired a homeless person before because they were like, that's a homeless person, came to the street store, realized that it's not a homeless person, it's a person, and hired a lot of them into work roles into their organization, which has ultimately gotten them off into the streets because they were able to get a job. So it's how do we break these various things up into smaller nuggets that we can affect? They're all based in that human insight. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that we could figure out any of this. It's a very tough thing. But the fact that it's so difficult is when you find one is what makes it so powerful. And maybe it's not about discussion now. Has anyone got any questions or any?
When you were discussing homelessness, trying to solve homelessness, and then saying, well, it's not going to solve it, we're going to make incremental changes, going to make it better, it made me realize that on the public level of discussion, it seems like everybody's talking about putting an end to terrorism, right? As if it's like something completely different that's going to come to a total stop, and anything less than that is unacceptable, right? And like on the perspective, marketing, communication level, how do we advance the conversation so we're not overreacting to something where we're actually trying to have the right kind of response?
It's a very, very relevant point, and I agree with you completely. It's how do we make those changes? And in every sector, I think it's very different, and it's got to be tackled in a different way. We were talking about this yesterday, that often we try and change the people who are unchangeable. And we need to realize that we need to speak to a different market. So when we were in the old city and we were talking about this conflict with the Orthodox part of the wall and the egalitarian section, which I'd never been to. I've only been here on like tours, and they just avoided that issue. It was very easy to just pretend that issue didn't exist. And I was listening to people talk about how you can convince older Orthodox people that it was time to bring men and women together in an equal way. And I turned around and I said, you can't. I don't think they're the right people to be talking to. They're too set in those ways. How can you then tell someone who's 80 years old that their entire life has been wrong? They're not going to accept that maybe flaw within them, and maybe they won't even see it as a flaw. But if you can start to speak to younger people, then you're already looking at it from a different perspective. How can we speak to the younger instigators, the younger people who have influence, the younger people who can make a difference? So I really do think that it's dependent on each sector, how we can communicate with the right people in the right ways, and to stop saying, let's end terror, let's end poverty, let's end violence against women, let's end these things. How do we start them? We can't end without beginning, and we're not beginning in the right ways. It's hard to answer the question because it's something that needs to be sat and debated and figured out and strategized and planned, but it's a very relevant way of looking at it.
This is I don't really have a comment on how to start solving things, but I really applaud the way that you're approaching these issues. I don't know if it's you as a person, which I fully applaud, or just the company you're working with and how you're doing it, because I think it's just changing my mind in terms of how I've approached certain big questions like that. And it's clear that you're approaching it that way and making a difference. You're actually starting to make a difference.
Thank you. I think my company are the company's ideology is based on this idea of the brutal simplicity of thought. And that's how we approach commercial work. You get it to the simplest form in order to overcome a problem. And it's just about taking that same approach and applying it to human problems. And I mean, I didn't one day decide that was how I was going to work when it came to NGOs. I kind of stumbled through the process and then looked at all the campaigns that I'd worked on and what had been effective and what hadn't been effective. And the thread that linked them all was a change in mindset. So make young people realize that people with dementia need love. I've got other examples actually. I just didn't think we'd have enough time. Make people realize that it's actually all about love. When you can break down to it, make people realize the homeless deserve love. Make the homeless realize that people are deserving of love. Make people realize that the drylands deserve love. I mean, it really is about the human problem. And we often try and affect the action and not the mental shift. And I think that we can use that. If this slide is the only one that you remember, I think this is the crux of it, is that we need to start creating change that's based in the human beings and not in the action that we want them to perform. Because even if someone isn't going to go and donate at a street store, even if they're not going to go and host a street store or share about the street store, they may have heard about it and in their own way go and say, you know what, I'm going to go and tackle something else in a similar means.
Kayli, if there's time, could you share with us what it meant to have a partnership with the shelter that you worked with, and if you require that for the people that are doing street stores throughout the world?
We worked with the Haven Night Shelter because we wanted to help raise their image as well. People are very afraid of shelters. They're always in like dangerous neighborhoods. They're always like tucked away, and we were never going to get people to go there. That wasn't going to be the action that overcame how people felt about the shelters. That we started working with them to try and make people more accepting of the shelter itself. But first, you had to become accepting of the homeless. So what we did with the Haven is that we took this plan to them, and we said to them, they didn't brief us and say we want to do an activation on the side of the road where we put up these posters. We said we think that we need to overcome the issue with the haves and the have-nots, not the haves and you. And once we can make people realize that the homeless are people, ultimately you're the ones that are going to benefit from it. You're the ones that are going to have a better reaction from the public when you do ask them for donations or when you do work with the public. So at first, at every street store that we did, we made sure, and we still do actually, but we don't insist on it when other people do them. We have social workers from the Haven come and work as our shop assistants. Oh, we don't say volunteers. I don't like the word volunteer. As our shop assistants who help the homeless put their outfits together, put their looks together. They love it. It's so funny. There's such funny moments. So we had a guy, showed him a shirt, it was blue. And he goes, I don't like blue. Is there a green one? And it was such a nice moment because for the first time, he got to choose. I digress. But he got to choose, and it's something we take for granted. We get to choose the things we want. Whether we have the choice in the like $10 a shirt department, the blue one, the green one, the red one, or the pink one, or in the $1,000 shirt department, there's still a sense of choice. And that's what the homeless don't have. So I've digressed completely. The question was the involvement of the Haven. So we had their social workers working as shop assistants, which actually gave them the opportunity to talk to the homeless in a more casual context, because the homeless are often very wary of social workers. There's this idea that for a lot of homeless, that it's easier to live on the streets than it is to go into the system, because as soon as you are in the system, you owe someone something, and they own you. And they feel more independent when they're on their own. So it gave the social workers a chance to actually speak to them in a non-formal environment so that they could try and see who was more willing to get into the system to be helped to get off the streets. But people don't often use them. The way that we've set it up is that anyone can go onto our site, you pick a language, it gets downloaded on our files, and a guidebook in the language will be downloaded onto your computer. And then you can do it as an institution, as a school, as a university, as private individuals, as companies. We've had big brands. Virgin Active did a whole bunch across South Africa, which was really, really nice. And within the little logo that says the street store, there's a gap where all these brands can put their logos, because it's a collaboration. It's not about us. It's about how we can work together to make a change. And that was why we went open source. Very often, especially in advertising, you take your idea and it's yours, and you protect it with all your might because you don't want anyone else to steal it, because they'll steal your thunder. But that was never our intention. We wanted to share because it's only in sharing that you can actually have an impact. That's why we're in open source, and anyone can do one. They can change. If they want to make the posters pink, they can make the posters pink. If they want to change it up and do it in a different way, if they don't want to actually print posters, we've had people just draw a hanger in a circle with a street store written on it, put it on a wall, and then just had a normal kind of store with tables and shelves and hangers. And that's fine, because it's not about us. It's about the impact that they're having.
First of all, really powerful, great things, and a big inspiration.
Thank you.
But I think I have a question that arises in me about this size B. How do you say it?
BiteSize.
BiteSize theory, because those problems are really deep wounds in the society, and my thought is maybe we're just trying to put a band-aid, plaster, band-aid on a really deep wound, and if it's not, you know, because this is an inequality, the government just let people live on the street, and this is something that I challenge this theory because I think that maybe and sometimes a lot of the philanthropy field is dealing with it to put band-aids about really deep wounds, and how can we from one hand do something, not be paralyzed by this deepness of these wounds, and from the other hand, not just to say, okay, for now we all just and there's some, you feel good when you do something, but I don't think that maybe it's stop us from getting to the next step, to the deeper solution, to the fact that the inequality is something that we can bear as a society, that we need to solve. And this is my question about the theory. How can we not just stop in the small one?
Can I add something?
Yeah.
And I was thinking if that plastic eye is to the problem or is to us to don't feel bad with that. It's like we are putting the band-aid to us, not to the problem. Not, okay, I can't solve the problem, but I feel good because I do this.
So in no way am I saying that policy doesn't need to change. But while we wait and we push for that policy to change, something needs to be done at the same time that starts to break down the problem. They need to work at the same time. It's not that one's more, obviously changing policy is more important. It's the end goal. But on the journey to get to that end goal, which could take many, many years, we can't wait to not do anything else at the same time. So there are Band-Aids, but lots and lots and lots and lots of Band-Aids create an impact and can impact policy. I've just completely forgotten their name. When they started putting spikes up in places where homeless people were sleeping, someone went, no, I'm not going to let this thing. We still haven't solved homelessness, but they affected policy that then got all those spikes removed. So it's like if every single person could have an impact in their way, someone has to one day listen.
I would say, I think it's interesting because it's very relatable to right now being in America, where I think pre-election, like people didn't think there was so much to do. I made the campaign call, this and that, but now post-election, it's like, what can I do every single day to try to save America? I don't know, but to try to make things.
Should have written save America.
What are you doing to save? But like, people make lists every day, like your action step of the day, and it does make you feel good. But that's also like, you need to feel like a human, and that you're not just sitting there helpless, and that you have no purpose. So I've been finding like, I'm not thrilled with how I came across this, but I love the idea of the bite size because we're human and we still do have responsibilities for ourselves, for our families, for whatever else we're doing, but to realize that there's all these other priorities and to figure a manageable way to move forward. Like if you want to lose 100 pounds, you're not going to go on a marathon and then you're like, done. No, like every day you have to push forward.
Yeah, but I think that the problem in our society, in America, in Israel as well, is that all organizations have like only one step, and usually they stuck there. For example, even organizations that deal with policy, they're stuck in policy and they don't know the ground and what happens there. And my question to myself is how to create hybridic organizations that you're beginning from the store shop, and after you invite people, organize them. And after you organize the people, you have maybe some meeting between all the places in the same city and country. And after maybe you suggest some paper to the policy. And I think that I don't know enough organization that see all process because it's so difficult and so hard. And and many organizations stuck and believe and do them and yes, I understand what you told, but in my dream as a social worker or activist, it's create solution and yeah, for example, homelessness for me it's like it's not enough for me to connect with the people, and I understand that what you say and why it's so important, love and open your heart to people, but I don't know.
I just wanna, when Chen brought this up, it was really on point because I felt like because I deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict all the time and the political situation and the short wins versus the long-term strategy that we're talking about with people, it's like it's always at this, the tension is always there. It's always there. Even in the smallest things. When I go, for example, and I talk to settlers, and they live in the West Bank, and they have Palestinian neighbors. The Palestinians don't have the same rights like them or the same employment opportunities. And he's telling me, no, what I can do today is to give employment to this Palestinian and pay them much, much, much better than Palestinians pay them. And that way, and then, and that's good. That's, creating relationships on the ground. That's, Palestinians shooting. But then when you're trying to stir the conversation back into a dialogue space of the long-term situation and one political scenario where maybe this specific settler is not in a future solution, is not even going, might not have to be living in this specific land, then everything, might not be able to live there, like physically, because if an agreement gets solved, or maybe yes, but the status of the Palestinian will be equal to them, so then it will not be the same thing. And I think in some contexts, in humanitarian and development context, it's beautiful. So these short wins really give you something tangible to hold into, but there are a lot of global and international causes. In my case, I see that the dealing with the status quo and the short wins, like introducing an Israeli and a Palestinian and putting this band-aid on, actually keeps us away from talking about the bigger solution. It's actually stopping a lot of people from realizing that there is even a political conflict or a problem that we need to solve. Just one last example. For example, there are, in the West Bank there are a lot of checkpoints for Palestine. And so this big company of Israelis wanted to intervene a building of a new checkpoint, and they wanted to say, we're going to build a bridge for Palestinians so they don't cross the street and maybe they'll get run over, so that in the checkpoint they can go up on the bridge. And then there was this one Palestinian organization, they say, can we talk for a second about the checkpoint itself and what it does to the freedom of our movement, because it cuts between two Palestinian lands, for example. So this bandit was a good cause to build a bridge so the Palestinians won't get run over. But then this group of locals, they wanted to talk about the bigger problem. There was absolutely no space.
So that exact example is the opposite of what I'm saying. These are people who are not looking at the human condition. They're not looking at human insights. They're projecting their feelings. A bridge is going to be what does the job and is nice, but they're not looking at what the real issue is. And the real issue, exactly. So that I agree with you in that case. That is the antithesis of what we need. It's projecting what you feel is right onto people who don't need that thing and not looking at the human problem. The human problem is the checkpoint. The human problem is not how to get past the checkpoint. So I agree with you completely there. And I must admit, there's so much, from a South African level, I can speak how, in my context, I can speak on how these human connections can work. But obviously, there's a huge context in America. We need to save America. That I don't know. So, I'm as involved in this conversation as I am with talking about it, but at the crux of it, while looking at these sorts of initiatives as a plaster or a band-aid is the simple way of breaking them down. Rather than solving homelessness, we're putting a band-aid and making people smile by giving them clothes. You're starting conversations that were never happening before. And the more people you have talking about something, more and more people start pushing towards the same agenda. 3 years ago, no one in South Africa cared that there were homeless people there. Now we have different groups who have been formed to try and end it. And you need to start those conversations. And starting those conversations begins with making people realize that something is wrong. When you're so like stuck in your own world and you don't even realize that there's an issue because you've got the wrong perception, the wrong stereotype, the wrong behavior or attitude, you can't even be part of the change because you don't know there's change that needs to happen. So big or small, from policy to pop-up store. Ooh, that sounded good. From policy to pop-up store, it's about finding that human can. I know, I'm like, wow, 2 Ps. I've always loved that. From policy to pop-up store, it's about people relating to each other, big or small. And if we can break down the problems that we do have on a human level and a behavioral level, I think that ultimately we can start to solve them in more real ways, not building bridges, not trying to change. The corn example was also so powerful for me, not trying to tell people to change the way they farm, but actually working with them to help them farm in a different way that was more beneficial to them, that worked within their belief systems. It's just those little human insights that we need to always tap into and work with.